retrogrades.
How to re-evangelize the de-Christianized West.
Support us in any way you can, most especially by your prayers.
From an authentically Catholic perspective.
Right-minded, righteous group that's equal in strength to the radicals.
From an authentically masculine perspective.
You and your friends versus me and my friends. Bring it on. What's up, parish orphans and retrogrades out there? Tim and Dave back with you today talking about that Super Bowl halftime fracas, the nonsense that everybody on Monday morning wanted to talk about, and some people in certain Catholic corners were talking about only reticently, because then that would mean they watched. Dave, what's up? Let's first let's get this out of there. The I guess it's LARPing, right? Everyone out there, and I don't, maybe 3 out of 4 of the people that are probably on the generally right side of things seem to be LARPing like crazy over this issue. I didn't watch the Super Bowl. Let's get this way out of there first. Before we can discuss the halftime show, we have to discuss why we know, because we watched it.
First degree LARPers who are like, I don't even watch sports, bro. And we talked about this already. It's like a form of virtue signaling. We discussed it on the Kobe show, right? So people are like, you know, all I watch is the news and EWTN. Right. And of course, it's like bully for you, but I like to recreate sometimes. So I like sports. Also, I happen to be a man, so I enjoy competitions. Right. But then there's like the second degree LARPer, right? Where it's, well, I watch sports, but I'll never watch a halftime show. Like, yeah, I don't want to watch the Super Bowl halftime show either, except because it has become such a cultural phenomenon, I don't want to be totally disengaged from being able to give commentary on the culture. So unless something is intrinsically evil, you know, you can kind of look at somebody from the face up, right, from the shoulders up, even if they're kind of immodestly clad. I think St. Alphonsus Liguori says, there's almost no way to lust after somebody if you're looking them in the face or in the eye. And of course, there's a certain amount of danger of falling into sin, right? So it's a prudential call. But there's also something redeeming in being able to counsel people away from this culture. And in order to counsel people away from this culture, sometimes you have to know what's going on. So we reticently, watched the Super Bowl together along with the halftime show. That doesn't mean, first of all, the music's horrible. You can't even call it music. And when did American pop culture become just so babyish, right? Were people twerking and like spinning around on a pole and doing the choreographed dancing? When did that become cool? It used to be when I was growing up, if you were talking about choreographed dancing and like in sync, you're going to get beat up. But nowadays, I know grown men admit they listen to like Taylor Swift and they're into the dance-offs. Like in every movie, the climax is like a dance-off scene nowadays. When did that happen? Like that would get somebody a beat back in my day.
Unless it's actually beat it, then dance-offs don't work. You resort to the actual violence. Dancing is no replacement. Let's take those points serially. Now, first off, point number 0. I'm sorry for having to adjust the lighting. This is my kids' schoolroom here, and they're always messing around with. Kids are messing around with the lighting again, is what I say every day before we record. But yeah, no, seriously. I mean, I just want to stay on the LARPers for a second. It is like cross virtue signaling. Like you said, that's first off. But I wanted to do more like an apologia for, one, when you're a commentator, the way you and I are, you have to go watch some of this. I mean, when you're a film critic, you have to go watch some bad films.
Unless it's intrinsically evil. Let's throw that out there, because then actual like right-minded, straight-up guys are going to be like, yeah, you can't go watch a rated X movie. But obviously, we acknowledge that distinction.
Sure.
And when it comes to
I don't think it's intrinsically. I mean, no one's out there. This is what This is part of what being a retrograde's about. Not that everyone out there that's not into football or whatever has to watch the Super Bowl. That's not what it's about. But what it's about is not one of the many kind of golden means we discussed in the first show, and it is relevant to every show, is that when an item, a moral item, action is not intrinsically evil, when it's not a matter of doctrine, when it's a matter of prudence, then we don't crystallize it as if it is. Furthermore, so that's it. And the other golden mean is when we're talking about being in but not of the world. The one side, mere cultural Catholics, liberal Catholics, too many at the Novus Ordo masses or whatever, I don't know how else to distinguish it, want to be in and of. But the other side, all too often, and this is where LARPing comes from, wants to be neither in nor of. So what did we do? We were watching it here at my house, right? We sent all 11 children out of the room, and we weren't like delightfully watching because we knew it was going to be so bad. We said, you guys go up to the upstairs, and we're going to watch this and laugh and take some notes, which we did. And that's fine, right? It's not intrinsically evil. So we're in the world because we're definitely football fans. Both of us are, as we talk about almost every show, it seems to find a way to come up. Basketball, football, boxing more recently. And we watch big matches and big games here. So that's being in the world. It's only being of the world if you were secretly, or I was secretly, rubbing our hands together and delighting in the fact that there's all these geriatric naked ladies on the screen.
Morose delectation from it, I guess is the moral theology term. Yeah, and obviously we weren't. That was something, we were both there in front of our wives, and obviously we were making fun of how ridiculous of a spectacle it was the whole time. And, like we said, it's a prudential call. If either of us were 13 or 14-year-old boys, I would say we need to get the heck out of the room. But we're grown, continent men who can try and keep our eyes above somebody's shoulders and on their face and rein in the impulses of the flesh. And we're there with our wives, and we're doing this to make commentary. So I just, it is a matter of prudence and whether that near occasion of sin is going to rise to a critical level. And that said, I think we had it sorted out pretty well, so I was in clear conscience, Otherwise, you can't do anything, because you go to foxnews.com and you're going to see the thumbnails of, like, russiandates.com where there's scantily clad person. Everything is, if we're going to take near occasion of sin as if it was something that had to be, like, intrinsically anathema, under pain of death in every single circumstance, no matter how short of a time, then you couldn't do anything. You can't leave the house because you'll see a bus pass by with a Calvin Klein ad on it. And we live in a what's the verb? Pornographied society. So, right now we're doing our best, and we have custody of the eyes, and I think that's all there is to say, at least on my end.
Yeah, well, the issue's a bit bigger than that, because when you hang out with a certain set of people, it can be really difficult to see beyond the limitations of that group of people. And this is kind of what we're talking about with in an era of parish orphans, where the kids are kind of running the household. That's what it is when the lay is running the house, the laity's running the household. You don't have the proper guidance from dad, and that's what we have. We don't get guidance from bishops on this. They never even talk as if there's a chance this might be bad. There's nary word to be heard. So you get the kind of bossy elder children in the household having the right ideas, like this is bad, especially for the littler kids. But this is what LARPing is all about, right? Let's say the eldest child in the household is 12 or 13. It's crystallizing some highly prudential judgment calls as always wrong or right. You get Kantian ethics. You get, a categorical imperative about everything. Oh, you never watch Super Bowl halftime shows. No, that's not true. Just because people were literally asking me on Twitter yesterday and the day before, how do you say it's bad, but that you watched it? Well, I'm going to tell you. It's non-advisory, and
I don't want to watch them anyway.
Worth talking about.
People act like it's some like secret pleasure we're getting from it. They're almost offensive to me. They're almost as offensive to me as a music and art lover as they are to me as a Christian, just because the music has gotten so bad. And the ridiculous dancing, it just makes me embarrassed for the people, like these choreographed dancers, and they have that ridiculous smirk on their face as they're like flopping around. I can't tolerate it on a moral level, but also just on like a human level. It's terrible.
But they're saying obviously, I don't think anyone that's out there criticizing or LARPing says we shouldn't, enjoy the music too much. They're saying, well, no one enjoys the music, probably most of them. They're saying it's the flesh show on parade. And it's like, again, dude, like, I'm a married man, okay? I want to keep this PG, but that's not, the other half of this is, healthy marital relations are supposed to be more than sufficient to alleviate that kind of cheap surrogation, right? To make unnecessary that kind of cheap surrogation. And it more than is, right? So people that are so quick to throw stones, like, why would a cultural commentator want to watch the Super Bowl? It can only be for the satisfaction of a cheap lust.
Well, there's a danger in there.
It's really, well, I'm not saying there's not danger, but it's really childish because, it's just like, it's like someone saying, if I'm like, hey, I forgot to put my money in the collection basket this week, where's the basket I want to go find? I just asked the usher this on Sunday. It's like if someone's like, oh yeah, I want to be alone with the money, huh? We would all laugh at that. Like, who's this suspicious? I don't understand why we're dealing with people of generally prudent mind, adult practicing Catholics, where because whether or not you're getting some sort of cheap thrill off of this stuff, whether or not you would be doing it, it's as silly as, like, I also don't steal when I'm alone. That's not to protest too much. I would never even think of protesting unless there were people out there making that accusation. It comes off as really childish, and it makes me wonder, sure, the temptation's always there when you got the geriatric Hispanic ladies flopping around on screen. Certainly you have to steel yourself in some sense, but to comment on it and to want to know what the new spectacle would be, particularly from guys like us that are retrogrades, that have just written this book, Rules for Retrogrades, that are pointing out, look, this is an attack plan by the enemy. All of the major players, all the way up the flagpole to Satan. I want to know, I'm curious. The last 10 years have been a marked difference since about 2010 in Super Bowl halftime shows. And so I'm curious who they are. I looked these guys up. It's a guy named Hamish Hamilton is the one running the show. And he's done it every year for the last 10 or 11 years, and that's about when we started noticing a decided change. I think the Timberlake, debrawing or whatever you want to call it was before these guys, but it's like they took
2000. It was early 2000s, 1999 or something.
04. But so they took that cue and have run with it, and now it's just it's always, what is the scandal going to be? And it's not even the kind of thing that just Americans like beer, 80s beer commercials, of course, unpolished men do, but it's more than that. There's more of an attack plan here. The other guy who writes it is named Ricky Kirshner. So Hamish Hamilton and Ricky Kirshner, go look these guys up. They're doing it every year. and there's always some boundary pushing, even with the whatever you want to call it, bikini wear. There's always something more. And each year, as a cultural commentator, you want to say, okay, what is it more? Because we're the guys who are claiming to be the formulants of the counterattack plan, right? So, I mean, that's what I wanted to say about the LARPing. It's really childish, and we have to get to the content of how to push back on this stuff.
Yeah, just I mean, I would recommend people stay away from the Super Bowl halftime show. In fact, if I weren't going to be doing commentary on it, and I weren't going to be, writing books, especially on feminism, in an age where the pop music industry, we've heard through various magazine articles, through Rolling Stone, that basically it's a prerequisite to be a female pop artist now that you have to be a feminist. So having done, we're doing the book on feminism, we're keeping our fingers on the pulse of this. So there is somewhat of a justification that's meritorious for putting yourself in this, I guess, near danger of sin. But if I weren't doing that, I'd stay the hell away from the Super Bowl halftime show, because it's going to be filth and smut, and it's evil, and it's provocative, and it's deliberately so. So I would say, yeah, if I were just to, like last year before we were doing the show, I just turned it off. We just turned it off for halftime. Didn't want to even deal with it. The bad music, the ridiculous provocative dancing. We didn't want to have anything to do with it, and it's just off in the house, and we started it up in the third quarter. And that's what I recommend people do, unless you have some real justification.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't want it to get LARPy up in here. Grown adults can decide whether or not these are skimpy outfits, whatever. But that's not. Yeah,
well, sure. I mean, some dudes struggle with lust, though. Like, that's not, we all have our
people know that out there.
That's not one that I think either me or you really have to. That's not a bothersome one. But if there's some guys out there, I just don't want to be giving everyone the green light to go watch this smut. No, it is bad.
They're not looking for a green light. Everyone knows whatever your habits are. If you're addicted to smoking, don't go around and close one nostril and inhale. But come on, I mean, the point is, yeah, it's neither a green nor red nor a yellow light. We're just saying this is what the signpost means culturally, all right? And I'm trying to defend against that kind of, I mean, because really, that's the other thing when you're about the 12-year-old or the 13-year-old kind of running the household. Bishop Barron's no-no list of people, assuming we'd likely be on it. There's a couple different tones of voice you could take. One is like, yeah, we are the 12-year-olds. We're going to play like daddy and tell people. I mean, there's need out there for theological and applied theological and philosophical wisdom, right? And of course, moral philosophy and moral theology is a part of that. But the people that are watching Catholic content on the internet, this is also what's probably, I think, most objectionable about the LARPing, is I'm sure there are people out there that would want to take a kind of bully pulpit or a bully camera, a cheap web camera, and with it be the advisory guy, the consigliere of what to do in every prudential situation. And that's why the LARPing happens, right? It's not notwithstanding it. It's because
let's define LARPing real fast, because I know somebody out there in the comment box is going to be like, "What's LARPing?" I would say LARPing.
Live action.
Correct me if you take a different tack on this or have a different idea about it. I'd say LARPing is a very particular way of like nerd virtue signaling, where things that aren't explicitly religious or righteous are automatically like scolded. So basically just anything that has to do with sports, pop culture is people have a tendency to look down their nose. That's LARPing for me, where you've intertwined in this weird way Christianity and dorkiness, which is really caught on in some trad circles.
Yeah, I think it's always been strong in trad. And again, these are good people that are just maybe you're partly miscued. It means live action role playing. And it's ever, I mean, people all out there are going to, if you don't recognize it already, you will. It's just what happens. And I'm saying I don't want to do it. That's why I'm not, people aren't looking for advice that are probably watching this show on, do I watch a halftime show or not? And I know there are LARPy, I mean, I'm not saying I know who they are, but there are probably LARPy people out there with a bully pulpit that want to be consulted on that. That's not me. Like, I'm not your bishop. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm saying this is what it means. This is what our voice is. LARPing also, since we're defining it, I think the first property is willful anachronism. So, like, I've literally been told on Twitter, you should dress more like a suit and a hat everywhere. I'm like, dude, I'm going to teach high school, man. I want to look nice. Well, today's a mass day. We go to mass once a week, and I look nice, tie, shirt, whatever. But it's like, I don't have to be Catholic. I don't have to pretend I'm from the 40s. And this came up yesterday with regard to an article on the kind of glorification of the 40s. It was kind of a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant conservative heyday in the 1940s, but it was the decade of aggressive secularization in America, if you look at the Supreme Court. So I don't really, and then people will get that, Catholics, and they'll say, okay, go further back, and everything has to be like, you have to pretend you live in the Holy Roman Empire under Charlemagne, and it's like, no, dude, I just want to be the best Catholic, and I do like the Latin Mass. I'm not LARPing when I say I think that the TLM should be the only Mass. I think we should go back to that, abolish all the changes, unsuccessful changes that are made. That's not because I'm LARPing. That's just because we have all the numbers, we have all the facts, we have all the figures. It's a discipline that matters. But yeah, I would say I don't have to pretend to wear a suit from the 30s or 40s just to go to Mass. You should look nice and all that.
You don't have to wear a zoot suit or anything. I think the reason people go for that, and you know me, I am more of that bent when it comes to these old, these matters of etiquette from a bygone age. I see them as
Dave's
a salutary thing. I'm not LARP, but like, yeah, I think people are so sick of the informality in this day and age, and just, you know, like seeing grown men in church in board shorts, that they're taking it the other direction. And it's like, yeah, you can wear a nice sports coat. I think there's a happy medium here where it's like, you don't have to wear a tweed suit or whatever, or a zoot suit, and a derby everywhere with like a walking stick. You can just wear like, you know, khakis and a nice blazer or something with like a cool tie, and that's good enough. So I like to think I navigate that, but whatever, it's neither here nor there.
Yeah, you're getting into some of the... Yeah, I mean, some of the people won't really, I think, out there think that a bully pulpit person, a non-bishop, we're not spiritual fathers to anyone, should be doing this, and I'm sure there are those out there that want to be doing it. I you know, literally, I think what's needed, what the laity can effectually accomplish, is the people that have studied this and thought about it for the better part of their lives. I mean, you have thought about these cultural issues and the theological issues themselves for the better part of your adult life. I've done so from a Catholic philosophy perspective, which is why we're a good team on these things for the better part of my adult life. Whereas other people are out like going to work, maybe businessmen, you know, ag people, whatever, lawyers, doctors. It's good at the end of the day, and it's a worthwhile product to hear, okay, these are guys that have spent most of their lives thinking about this catastrophe in the church, this development of it. How does this affect the philosophy and theology, which is really what matters? This situation in the culture, the new catastrophe, new iteration of it, how does it affect the philosophy and the culture? This item of politics, it happened today. It's a new phase of our cultural degeneration or whatever. Yeah. What does it have to do with philosophy and theology? And that there's a genuine non-LARPy, absolutely valuable role for, I think, people like us in that regard, and that's what I'm happy to do. And some of the things where it's like, okay, this is a prudential call, I mean, we do deal with this. I'm usually like, so, you know, beware the obvious pitfalls, but let's move on. Whereas you get into the process issue as if it's a substantive issue itself, and all of a sudden I wanted to talk about this Huffington Post piece that came out on the 4th, and it's hilarious, and I think you'll have a lot to say about it, Dave, from a ultimate critic of feminism perspective. It's here's the title, okay? It's February 4th, right after the Super Bowl. It says, J-Lo's Super Bowl's pole dance was cringeworthy to many real strippers. Here's why. And I read this thing on Huffington Post, and it's hilarious because what it proceeds to say is that pole dancers and sex workers of all sort are offended because basically they're saying it's a cultural commandeering by a non-stripper glamorizing it, I guess, for all the scumbags out there.
There's a stripper culture? We can do cultural appropriation for, like, the striptease culture? Are they a people? You know, when it's like, well, I didn't mean to offend anyone in this community. I hate the word community. There's all these communities I didn't know about. Like, I thought your city was your community, but there's like, stripper communities, and there's, like, the water polo community, and then it's getting absurd. So I didn't know this is a thing.
It was funny when people would say this before the internet. What I've learned over the last year and a half, forcibly being on the internet more than I'd like to be, to do stuff like this, doing TNT, is it's a little bit less farcical now that there are, underwater basket weaving, whatever, specific communities, like stripper communities, adults. I mean, there really are online fora that I guess are very important at an emotional level to a lot of people. Which is fun. It is funny. It's a funny phenomenon that goes with the technology. People would talk this way. You're lifting from a Seinfeld joke in the 90s or something, and the joke I think hit more than when people weren't all online. So it was kind of like, how is there like a stripper community? I guess you hang out and birds of a feather flock together. So whatever, but there's a direct access because of the internet. And this is kind of this is kind of part of what I was saying. These people hang out online together. People even have Twitter friends they've never met. I mean, look at me and Taylor Marshall. We didn't meet until we'd been, making online content for 9 months together. We met in the summer, and 30,000 people watched the walk-up. It is a funny kind of thing. Nevertheless, they're actually mad that J-Lo was glamorizing. I didn't see anything that was glamorous in that S show. That was abysmal for the people out there that didn't watch it. Let me just say that. But they're saying it was a glamorized version of what they do, sex work, and it's in real life it's very dangerous, and it's hard for them to get insured, and it's hard for them to get all the accoutrements of normal living. And they also said this is the most, in this sense, it's very unfeminist for them to be culturally appropriated from, and stripping is very feminist. That this is what I was going to ask you about, Dave. The feminists are really torn on this issue of sex work, and because it's empowering, right, in this cheap way, because men are drawn to it, and it does kind of enslave vicious men. I was tweeting about this yesterday. But on the other hand, some of the feminists still have a shred of a conscience and know that inherently natural law, this is very demeaning work. What do you say?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Number one, there is this split among the feminists about whether, especially in the realm of pornography, whether pornography is empowering, which is just a ridiculous thought if you think about it, right? Having some scuzzbag man treat you like a walking piece of meat and do just the filthiest acts that one can think of. I won't mention any here, obviously, for the sake of not luring anyone into these vivid and titillating thoughts. Treating someone like a piece of meat is empowering? No, it's despicable and disgusting and awful. And there are some people, yes, who, like, the emperor has not driven the goodness out of them fully, just mainly, where they're like, yeah, I can see where a guy like punching you in the face and like doing these horrendous sex acts to you is actually not empowering. So I'm going to go ahead and say no there. Yeah, there's that split in the feminist camp, but I would say that sadly, by and large, feminists break down into the sex and sex work is empowering camp. It's a minority that are actually opposed to that sort of thing.
Sure.
But within, I can't believe, and there's something I read in a book, and I don't have the quote right in front of me, but it's like, we're being constantly told that everybody has to have something to say. The MTV generation, express yourself, tell everybody what you have to say, tell everybody what's inside of you. No. Most people aren't virtuous, and most people haven't cultivated the intellect. Therefore, most people shouldn't be saying anything at all. When we've gotten to the point as a society where sex workers start thinking that they have this block and they can pipe up and stand on their little soapbox and be offended that they're being like demeaned in this way, and they think of themselves as an authentic community and not a despicable aberration, then we're just screwed as a society. Like, that's where we are now.
Their jobs and the functionalism that goes with their jobs are a crude aberration. The people themselves obviously have dignity and all that.
Well, yeah, but they spent it. Yeah, I mean, sure. Like the fallen angels. Yes, I understand on a theological level. Like, these are creatures of God, but they've thoroughly debased themselves and, have sold away much of their dignity. You can live an undignified life, and that's what they're doing, and they're reveling in it. And they're not far from shying away from these things. They're embracing this sin and letting, just like when, how with homosexuals, they let the sin consume them and actually form their identity the way like faith would form a proper person's identity, this good, righteous person's identity.
It's the problem with making a res publica, a mini, even online republic, out of something other than virtue, right? So, I mean, if you're like a guild worker or something, you're making a little res publica out of the guild that you and a community of other individuals use to, do legit work for their family. So it still is, it's not the ultimate virtue, it's not eudaimonia, but you've made a little community, a little res publica out of what you do together, how your craft, how to get better at it. You're right. This is what's so wicked about feminism and the other lesser identity politics, is that they're making a res publica out of that one of their vices. And usually with the left these days, I watched State of the Union and the response last night by the Michigander woman, the governor. I mean, they're making a res publica out of the very worst aspects. I mean, sure. So in books 6 and 7 of Plato's Republic, he talks about that this is absolutely what happens when everyone has a vote. So it's not. This is why a democracy is inherently wicked. And you think about this when you watch the Super Bowl. Is that? Yeah, I'm unpacking it further. I'm giving it some teeth. Literally, like. I'm watching the Super Bowl, and I forget which of the commercials. We were going to do some of the commercials that the morons out there are laughing at, and we're just sitting there like, I just can't believe this person has an equal vote, and this person is whoever might be laughing at this as was designed to do.
Here's how we wouldn't hang out ever in public or private. If you've ever seen a Super Bowl commercial and been like, oh, that is great. Or if you've ever said that the best part of the Super Bowl is the commercials, I would never hang out with you. That's bottom line. I just want to float that out there, get it out there.
So it's out there. Okay, people are gonna. The best part of the game is the football, and we talk about this all day long. The Super Bowl takes on a WWF feel because due to the constraints of injury, they can't play series, so it becomes more like this one-off circus-like event. And in basketball, what you're doing when you play series, by the way, in sports, hockey, baseball, basketball, are all, you play 7-game series, and what's happening is the refrain is by game 4 or maybe game 5, the teams have figured each other out, and it literally is just the better team. But there's jockeying for the first, more than half of the series in terms of strategery, right? That one coach is employing against the other, and there's none of that in the Super Bowl. So because in football's so rough, it's a great game, we love it, but it's so rough that they can't play series. So that lends to the circus-like atmosphere. It lends to the fact that all these people that don't know, an out route from a slant route, they don't know trips left, trips right. They don't know anything about football, and they're watching the game, and that's fine. It's enjoyable for all. We don't need to make a res publica out of football, but it's a one-off. You don't play series. It's not, a very small portion of the viewers are actually fans, and so that adds to the allure for guys like Hamish Hamilton to make it just a sex fest anyway.
Well, I think this is really like the brass tacks of the show, and it's that feminism is kind of ruining football. The reason we have the ridiculous spectacle clown halftime shows is precisely because the NFL is trying to market itself to a diverse audience. It's trying to get in every single woman to try and cultivate a bigger fan base and interest them in the sport of football. And here's a news flash: women don't really like sports. I don't know if that's too politically incorrect to say now. Dave, that's a generalization. Yeah, so it's also a generalization to say fire is hot. It's also true. But the NFL is reaching out to women, and I guess women like Beyonce and J-Lo and whatever other talentless artists we've had to abide for the last 15 years of Super Bowl halftime shows. So we're having to see these spectacles partly because of feminism, because they're trying to lure in women who aren't actually interested in the game in the first place. And that's also the problem with the commercials. We have to have commercials that have a dumb little punchline that's not really funny, that everybody pretends is funny, in order to actually interest the women who say it's my team and it's your team and it's game day and all these corny little suburban isms. So there's that. And then, yes, the women on parade, there's this weird irony that these halftime shows with the scantily clad women, that's empowering for women. This farcical notion that shaking your butt in sequin underpants empowers you, but that's what it is. And yeah,
let me read from you the start to this article. It's kind of worth a laugh. In case you missed it, actor, singer, and celebrity Jennifer Lopez briefly performed a beginner's pole dance. She's just an amateur during Sunday's Super Bowl halftime show, when she ascended fairly gracefully upon a slowly spinning pole and then held 2 poses while lip-syncing. While many viewers and members of the media were impressed by the 50-year-old entertainer, which is funny, it's like a dig, many actual pole dancing strippers like me were cringing as we reflected on what a tough couple of years it's been for folks in our industry. Let me say, I'm sorry, it's been a tough couple of years for people in the industry. Does that reflect maybe a moral awakening in America or whatever? I don't know what the tough couple of years are.
The flesh trade, just no one carries $single bills around anymore. It's all about credit cards.
That's true. It's Bitcoin was catching, and it was ruining things for the $1. You can't put a virtual coin in a geriatric lady's underpants or whatnot. So there's a skit. There's always you made reference to it. There's always been the schizophrenia with feminists on how to employ sex, and it's very telling as to the movement itself. But insofar, what interests me is insofar as feminism has crept into the popular consciousness quite effectively, which is what we're kind of on about, as it were, in the book and several of our shows. I'm curious how this affects sort of the average person that's like, oh, I don't want to be, a weaponized moral thinker. You know how there's that basic allergic response in your average Super Bowl viewer who is, in more danger of these things, greatly more danger of these things than you or I, will say, oh, well, I don't want to, I mean, I wouldn't want my wife dancing around like that, but I don't want to say what's right, what's wrong. They seem to be there's a very basic in the popular consciousness, that is now, there's a very basic kind of schizophrenia that's been happening in the last, I'd say, year or two. Maybe this is what this writer is on about. As to what do we do in a post-sexual revolution era with the civil liberty of, some like pole dancing, sex work, porn in general. They don't, I mean, of course, it's all vile, it's all reprehensible, to us, but except in the popular consciousness, how does one treat of it at the same time saying that it's good, women can do whatever they want with their bodies, and yet when women do whatever they want with their bodies, it's always bad. Horrible things always happen. She talks for 1,500 words about the dangers of her industry, but then she's bemoaning the fact that Jennifer Lopez only got to pantomime it without subjecting herself to those dangers.
It's putting license and liberty, if you call like being free to sin and do wicked acts liberty. It's not really, because liberty is the freedom to pursue the good, as we know. But it's what it really is putting license above morality. And that's what's happened. We live in a post-moral culture, right? We live in a culture of relativism where people don't even believe in objective morality anymore. So what they're doing, they've taken this false freedom, this unnatural freedom to do whatever you want that we'll call license here, and they're putting it on a scale next to whatever remnants or vestigial morality people still harbor in their sick, twisted, and darkened Western souls. Then they're putting it on a scale, and there's a balancing test. And obviously, since like license actually means something to people because people want to do what they want to do, right? People are selfish and most of the time just completely lacking in virtue. So you've got license over here, and you're weighing it against like vestigial morality that people don't think is objective anymore. They think
still
it's subjective.
There are still impulses, right?
Right. You can't derive it from somebody. Right, yeah. We have it because it's the natural law, right? God wrote the natural law into our hearts. And so it's going to be there even when you've basically taken your soul and put a bunch of mud on it with sin and habituated vice, right? But so license always wins out. So you have people who are like, well, I want the freedom to do whatever I want, even though it makes me miserable. And that's basically what the demons in hell say, right?
Sure. Yeah, so that's all around. There's plenty of it to be had. Don't go watch this thing if you didn't watch it, people. There's nothing. You're not really missing anything. But together with the stupid Super Bowl commercials, we're just sitting there waiting to get back to the game. It was a really good game. I really enjoyed watching that Super Bowl more than many of the last 5. It was a very compelling game to me. I don't know why I was so into it this year. I really enjoyed it. Part of it's just when you go to a Super Bowl party. I know I'm only talking to a portion of our audience, but you go to a Super Bowl party and you get a chatty Cathy, or just someone that wants to hit you up and bring you up to speed on their life. It's like, I'm here for the game, man. I have friends that come over and only just when we're watching the NBA Finals, it doesn't matter whether it's 4 games or 7. We're just watching. It's well understood. Again, it's a little different in the NFL. It's well understood, man. Don't talk to me except at commercials, and even then, it should be game analysis or whatever. We're proud of the fact that the athletes might not be moral exemplars in other ways, but these are the best of the best. Football, basketball, these are my favorite sports. Whatever. At Super Bowl parties, you're running the risk of getting chatted up in the middle of a big play or even a less big play. So This Super Bowl was really fun just because we only had people over that really wanted to watch the game. Everyone was there in front of the screen. No, it's just the first time I watched a Super Bowl like that. So from a football perspective, I really enjoyed the game, and I was happy with the outcome for the Kansas City Chiefs. What's up, Harrison Butker? We'd like to have him on the show. Came on with me and Taylor on TNT. after they'd been knocked out of the AFC Championship last year. I'd like to have him on now that he's the Super Bowl champ, a christened Super Bowl champ. But yeah, I thought it was a good game. But there is a lot going on here. You know, feminists are contorted. The moral revolutionaries of the last 50 years get all contorted, no pun intended, over the sex shows because, like Dave called it, vestigial morality, the basic moral impulse that the wrong philosophy and unimproved human will inclined towards sin, even if they've been wallowing in the wrong thing, they can't get rid of it all.
They're self-hating hookers, basically. That's what it is. We've devolved into a society because we have claimed absolute license to live like beasts. And yet we do have the vestigial morality. People lionize their lifestyle, but hate themselves for it. So we have feminists who are claiming that J-Lo and Shakira or Shakana or whatever her name is are really empowered, but at the same time, every inch of our souls is like, this is despicable, and they just, you know, they're flopping their tongues out and making a complete ridiculous spectacles of themselves in front of the entire civilized or not very civilized world, right?
Like Steve
that's empowerment. It's self-hating.
Season 1 of Stranger Things is like, perverts always know it's wrong. That's why they can't lift their eyes, and that's precisely right about J-Lo and Shikana or whatever her name is. But yeah, so that's it. We just wanted to say we watched the game. We're not LARPing, but it was morally reprehensible what was happening every minute that football wasn't being played. But you can watch football if you're. This is just one of the facts. You can enjoy it. You can. There's intellectual analysis to be done on what the left is plotting. We didn't get to that as much, but I think just pointing out the way that even they're crossed up over the sex trade, the flesh trade, is very telling. And when Rules for Retrogrades comes out, by the way, the book, we're going to be doing shows on. We'll probably do a show later this week on our first rule. If you want to join the launch squad and add your voice to those reviewing this book and what does the book really do but say how to push back, then you guys are going to be equipped with an arsenal, as it were. So please do go on Amazon, pre-order the book today. Hit me up on DM or Dave up on DM if you want to be part of the launch team. There's still some room. We haven't hit 300 yet. We said was going to be our max out, so we're not there. Got a lot of response before. We're really psyched about it. We're going to do a show on the book alone, Chapter 1, Rule 1, later this week. And yeah, that's all we got on the Super Bowl.
Yeah, don't do feminism. I mean, that's the issue. It brings you to strange and crazy and self-contradictory places. You become a self-hating, a self-loathing person, and the Super Bowl halftime show is like, you know, case in point.
Self-loathing pole dancer.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you got some remnants like claiming that pole dancing is dignified and that somehow like J-Lo or Shakira brought some level of indignity to this dignified and terrific art of
well, they were
pole
amateurs.
dancing.
That was an amateur display. It's ridiculous. And frightening, the strange moral place where we've been brought to in 50, 60 years of sex revolution. Oh, you know, I've been forgetting to say this. People, please do, and then now that we're really making a push for the books, subscribe, hit like, you know, hit the bell. And our Twitters are there. If you don't follow me or Dave on Twitter, please do. That's why we put our names up there the whole time. You'll get this, crack commentary all day long, every day, or at least the possibility of it. Also, our Patreon accounts pop up at the end. We're going to be, rigorously trying to support this book, getting in the right hands. We have not only the launch team, but through contacts, we're working to infiltrate the more secular conservative culture as well and get this maybe in an election year, even get it in the hands of the right people on the right side of culture and politics outside of just the Catholic world. And we're going to evangelize those people as well. You'll see when we read rule number 2 that, intellectual conservatism is inherently Catholic. And this is what we're trying to do, is really evangelize. Because at the end of the day, there's nothing else to do. that matters. Anyway, thank you guys. Have a good day. We will be back with you with rule number 1, rules for retrogrades. Next time, everyone go to Amazon.com and pre-order today, so you're on the book buying team, and maybe you can be on the launch team. Hit us up. Thanks a lot.